Welcome to the University of Derby Online Learning Summit, Evolution of Online Learning, Informing Learning and Teaching for the Future. The title of my talk today is Purpose and Repurpose. Strategic Learning Design Gets More Bang for Buck from Original Academic Content. My name is Dr. Simon Bignell. I'm a Chartered Psychologist and Senior Fellow of the Higher Education Academy. I'm a Senior Lecturer here at the University of Derby. This talk describes repurposing a body of academic work about autism, Asperger's and ADHD into multiple high-impact formats. Using lessons learned from previous pedagogical research on education for sustainable development funded by the Higher Education Academy and best practices in virtual worlds teaching funded by JISC, I show how conventionally delivered campus-based learning content can be developed over the long term for different purposes whilst maintaining pedagogic integrity and professional standards. Including in the talk, I put examples of how using strategic learning design has served as a foundation for online learning, collaborative international partner teaching, commercial short courses and parents and professional courses, internal and external staff training, Keynote conference presentations, an Amazon #1 best-selling textbook, and a free massive open online course or MOOC with over 90,000 learners from across the globe. So good academic content isn't just engaging, it's purposefully designed. It informs teaching practice and creates a positive student experience. Purposefully developing, reusing assets along with expert subject knowledge can contribute to the progression of external learners into students at the university. It can really enhance the student experience and have a broad impact out there in the community. So what I want to talk about first is the original content. This was from my third year module, Autism, Asperger's and ADHD. We've had hundreds of students through that, and they take that as an optional module. So students elect to do that at the end of their studies in the third year. It's a very popular course, and that's been running since 2006. One of the things about that module is that students really want to take it. It's assessed in quite a different way. Traditionally, it's done as an exam, but even so, students are still attracted to it because in dealing with interesting topics, I think, like autism, Asperger's and ADHD, it sets them up for future work. We've had a lot of students come through actually with those conditions as well, and they report great benefit in finding out more about the detail and academic theory and research surrounding these. So that module's been going on for a while. It's, as I say, very popular, but that was the original content that I wrote many years ago and have subsequently updated each year that acts as the basis for the content and the reuse of that content that I want to talk about today. Coming out of that module, which was structured across 12 different sessions, each has a week associated with it. It's obviously a campus-based module. These discrete sections are taught individually. The international partnership we have with Mediterranean College, so this is teaching over in Greece, Saloniki, and in Athens. They took the course, we ported it over to our international partners, and they've been teaching it for nearly a decade now. So the reuse has been widely available to our collaborative international partnerships, adding value, of course, to the offer from that original material. Now, in building up material so that it's available to international partners, we've thought about how we can reuse this material. Reusing it isn't just about packaging it up, it's about making sure the integrity of the course is maintained as we go forward with the materials. This is best done in a modular fashion, such that we can talk about discrete topics. So for me, in building up the content, it was really important to contain it within sections. So each section roughly related to a week of the module. So for example, we'd cover things like diagnosis, assessment, interventions, theory, etiology, comorbidity. Then there'd be formative elements associated with some of those sections as well, which would prepare students for the related assessment. So this would either be a coursework, depending on the format in which it was given, if it were online, or if it's a campus-based version of this, then that is traditionally an exam. So in thinking about this modular design, we were able to take sections of this original content. As I say, roughly there was about 8 discrete content sections, and then move them around as we want. And it wasn't just sort of every week we brought in the material and then sort of like a story, we increased the complexity of the overall academic content. It was each week there's a discrete content which had clear learning outcomes associated with it. So this made it relatively easy to then build up commercial short courses for parents and professionals. I knew from talking with my network in the community around autism, Asperger's and ADHD that there was a great demand for courses that either professionals, say special educational needs coordinators, teaching assistants, heads of year in special schools and mainstream schools could use for their professional development planning and their portfolios. So they were very keen to access some content around my module, Autism, Asperger's and ADHD. But also I knew from those communities that parents were very keen to access this material in a dedicated fashion. So they wanted perhaps in an accessible format where they could answer specific questions about, what were the causes of these conditions? What could they do with their children to make things better, especially around autism. So we built up a good rationale for the courses and packaged those together on the back of the original undergraduate teaching. That wasn't too difficult to do, but what we did have to do was have a firm structure to that and ask the question, first of all, well, what do we want to include within this paid for short course? So we did 2. We did one that was dedicated to parents of children with autism, and then one that was dedicated to professionals working in the field. And these 2 paid for short courses were just on autism. So they've been quite successful. They're available there, and obviously they provide income to the university, which is always a good thing because it allows us to do other ventures around the course content as well. But it also allows us to have a commercial offering over and above any free materials that we supply, or those materials that are available under academic undergraduate or postgraduate offerings. So that said, the content has also been used in a fashion, if you like, in postgraduate teaching. So it's been ported across into some programs where we would bring it in to master's level programs. So there, what's required is just bringing up the level of challenge associated with the original content there to match the expectations of those individual learners, of course. So we need to pitch it at an appropriate level for the students to make sure that it's engaging and that the course itself is pitched at the right level for those students, really. So there we have the original campus-based course materials. We have international collaborations with other institutions, higher education institutions in Greece, our partner institution over in Mediterranean College. We have 2 short courses come out of this original content, making sure that they are pitched all at the right level, of course. And then I was very interested and often asked in providing staff training. Now, the staff training was around autism primarily, but it included an element of ADHD as well. And initially that was a package that I put together for internal staff training at University of Derby. So what I needed to do was take the elements from those sections that I spoke about, the different sections that were comprised of the weekly traditional lectures from the undergraduate module, and asked the question, well, what would be the best possible combination of that to give to, for example, people working in the dorms, the residential supervisors and the people working in that context, so actual staff of the university, and any interesting parties that wanted to come along and hear more about autism and ADHD. It turns out that they were very keen in finding out about the applied elements of autism, Asperger's and ADHD. So they wanted specific guidance on, well, what do I do when this happens? Or how do I talk to a person about this? So it was very much more problem focused than perhaps an undergraduate course might be. So that construction of the internal staff training was very different from how one might imagine putting together an undergraduate module, for example. It was very directed, and over doing this many times now, I think I've sort of fine-tuned that content so it answers the question in advance that people in those internal training sessions come up with. So it's about the practicalities. What should we do under these circumstances? Things like sensory sensitivities, or executive function, or stuff that actually impacts on people's lives and perhaps some of our students present with. So having done that for a number of years, internal training here at the University of Derby, then I packaged that up with the same practical elements and made that available as an external staff training, and I've delivered that across a number of settings as well. So in building up both internal staff training over a number of different sessions, I was able to package this up quite effectively into external training. The external training is charged for, or commercial training, to various organisations, and in doing so we can present a service from the university based around the practicalities of what actually people want to hear about. So in doing those internal and external staff trainings, it was really important to realise what people actually wanted from them. They weren't necessarily interested in the deep theory or underlying etiologies of these conditions. They wanted to know about the actual people. So case studies were really important in these. Issues of sensory sensitivities, for example, and the practical problems that people with autism, especially, depending on the severity of their presentation, present with, what they're going to be like and what we can do to make their lives much better, either in the workforce or here at the university, in dorms perhaps. So the original content then from undergraduate modules was repackaged and repurposed and reused with a different pitch and a different purpose, essentially, but the quality was maintained throughout. And also, when one was upgraded and brought up to scratch, with literature reviews and a refresh of the research material and theory, all of the courses were, all of the factors were, all of the elements associated with this were also updated. So there's an iterative process, of course, in any teaching of updating it in line with the latest research findings. So this led across an original undergraduate teaching module that was original because I wrote it, I researched it, I did massive literature reviews around that, I put it together for direct teaching. We had a module that was designed for face-to-face delivery, so campus teaching. Then we had the UDOL modules that came off of that. These were online learning modules that were also delivered in our psychology program. There were our collaborative international partners, and there were short courses for parents and professionals. We also had the internal and external staff training as well. All of this material updated in line with the latest research and findings from various research studies and updating theory as we go. It was all brought up to scratch each year, pretty much, in an iterative process of making sure everything was the best possible teaching that we could give across those platforms. And this led to a number of presentations as well, both in institutions and third sector services, and keynote presentations at international conferences as well. So the keynote conference presentations were absolutely essential to get the word out there and to maintain my wider network of not just like-minded academics, but practitioners in the field as well. And that network is critical because staying in touch with people in the field is vital to keep your own ideas up to scratch. And also where you're adjusting course materials for that given presentation at that conference, whatever it might be, that keeps the content fresh. So where you're updating it in one element, you're also going to make the changes across all of the other elements. So the updating is absolutely key to this. So keynote conference presentations there's been quite a few, and these are really important because they allow me to impact on practitioners and allow me to communicate essential elements from that original content, but also keep me on the ball with the latest literature and in the wide networks that surround this material. There's also been a textbook come out of this, Autism, Asperger's and ADHD. That was an Amazon #1 bestseller, which I'm really proud of. And I think the reason that was successful was that it was really quite thorough. And part of the element of reusing and repurposing material is that because it's in so many domains, it has to be updated constantly. And if you fine-tune that ability to bring in new information across each of these different elements, albeit an online learning course, a campus teaching course, a Mediterranean College, a collaborative international partner course, the commercial short courses, either for parents or professionals, internal or external staff training, ready for a keynote conference speech, which obviously has to be on the ball. What you're doing is you've got your fingers out in a lot of different pies, so you're disseminating this material in each of those different elements quite a lot, and it's surprising just how much impact that has. So although you're talking essentially about the same material, you're accessing different parts of the community. Parents and teaching assistants and heads of year and even politicians as well. So the impact of this over the years has been really quite big. Shifting lots of books helps as well, because that core content really gets it out there. And of course, that carries the message that we offer these different trainings here at University of Derby as well. So if you can turn your modules into a book, and that book is made available to everyone all over the world if they want more information, that also carries the message that if they want to, they can come back to University of Derby and either take one of our short courses in more depth, or they can go on a free MOOC, massive open online access course, or they can engage with any of these different elements that we make available to them. So coming on to perhaps the highest impact element of the reuse of this original material then was a free massive open online course, a MOOC. This is specifically designed around the original content that I put together way back in 2006, but of course has been brought right up to date. This was offered originally in an earlier platform. I think it's on its third iteration of online platforms at the moment, but it's been exceptionally popular over the COVID lockdown period. We've had about 90,000 learners, coming up close to 90,000 learners at this point, right from across the globe. The likelihood is it's a combination of just people who are really interested in autism, Asperger's and ADHD as a topic, and they want to access these materials free. But also, of course, the COVID lockdown has pushed people to things like MOOCs, so they've absolutely exploded in popularity. Anyway, I'm fairly certain that it's a combination of all of those, and I'd like to think that some element of putting together in a modular format in discrete sections has contributed to the success of the Autism, Asperger's and ADHD MOOC. One of the things about that MOOC was we did a lot of development work around it. We've included things like audio-visual material, so video interviews of people like head teachers of special schools, deputy heads, people in charge of the behavioural policy in those schools. Many teachers were interviewed. We also went into mainstream schools and special schools, did lots of interviews, and also sort of shots where we spoke about the interventions that were happening in those schools as well. So it wasn't just about the sort of data that can be captured with people in interview format. It was getting a feel for those kind of environments as well and trying to link that back to the content. One of the things we also did on the MOOC in planning that out and to add value to it was to put in some online quizzes as well. These were associated with online badges that you can learn, and also this material was exceptionally good for people that wanted to use it for PDP, so professional development planning, or even just to boost up their CVs as well. It's a very efficient way to do a course on a dedicated subject. The value we added within the MOOC, I think, was quite considerable. We spoke to people involved in third sector services, heads of charities. We spoke to people actually working in the field, like speech and language therapists, a lot of educational psychologists that we interviewed. So it was a case of going out and trying to really completely enhance the original material that went in way back all those years ago into the original content that was writing. I wrote the original content in 2006, and it's since each year been updated and repurposed gradually over time. The MOOC itself was comprised of a series of different modules. These could be taken all at once if you want, if you're that super keen, or you could come in, you could drop in and just take some of them if you wanted to. So in planning out this material, the first question, of course, is what's going to be of value, what's going to be useful. So drawing from those short courses, drawing from the other undergraduate and postgraduate modules that we had put together, online learning and campus learning, including elements from each of those tailored for the specific purposes of the students on those formats of courses, as well as the internal and external staff training that I had developed, elements from the quite high profile Keynote conference presentations that I've given in various places, the work that I've done in the third sector, and also my own work outside of the university. All of this experience and this knowledge across multiple formats has created a body of work that has been repurposed, maintained University of Derby branding, which I think is important, and reused. But importantly, it hasn't just been ported across. The first thing we've had to do is to think strategically in the design of these different elements. So the first question is, what are we trying to do with this material? But what matters is asking the question, well, how are we going to deliver that? What is our purpose? So what are the learning outcomes there? What are we trying to achieve? Then we think, well, with the current content that is put together in a modular fashion, so different sections, which might originally relate to lectures, of course, that were given, once a week in an undergraduate lecture theatre, how each of those sections can be utilised. So keeping it modular has been very important. Now, of course, there's some crossover, so you can imagine repurposing this for a very specific purpose, albeit commercial training or whatever. But it gives us the ability to then say, well, we'll take this part of the course and this part. So if someone's interested in, treatment or strategies for support for autism and also for ADHD or Asperger's or something, then we can say, well, this particular training or this particular course is going to take, section 3 and section 5 and bring that in. So it's portable and modular in that sense. So one of the things of maintaining the quality has to be in updating those discrete modules. So a bit of strategic learning has gone into that. So the design leads to strategic learning because you can take those discrete modules and you can package them up pretty much however you want. Now, if you've got that across multiple platforms, it's quite easy to like Lego, if you like, to bring this in any fashion you want. So if you want to put together a dedicated course or training or even publication, that's relatively easy to do because you've got multiple formats. You've got all of the resources from things like the short courses and the MOOC, from the text writing in my textbook, and from those keynote presentations, and from the more informal talks that I've done in charities and the third sector work. All of that is available. So having good indexing for all of that stuff is absolutely critical. I hope you agree with me that it's really valuable to repurpose and redistribute across multiple formats original academic content. In doing so, we really add value as an institution to learners out there. They might not be our registered learners on campus, traditional format learners, if you like. They might be taking online degrees. They may be international partners. They may be people taking online short courses, paid for or free. They may be engaged in the MOOC. But one thing that does carry through is that in getting a taste of the materials, we've just planted the seed that that person who's engaged with that original content might just join us full-time as a student on one of our programs. It might not be, that year. It might be 2 years or 3 years or down the road somehow. But in presenting ourselves in the best possible way we can and having the highest possible impact across different formats, we give everyone the opportunity to come to University of Derby and engage with our materials. And I think this is equally applicable to all manner of content. I don't think there's anything that we couldn't do across all of these formats. So hopefully you'll agree with me that in developing out original academic content, thinking about how we can modularize that and maintain integrity of academic standards, and thinking about the deep pedagogy there. Well, what sort of learning outcomes are we trying to meet, and how are we best doing that for the person that would take that particular format? How we can package this up and reuse it, and how there are overlaps between these different formats as well. So something that's suitable for online learning can benefit our campus-based students. And each of those materials, they produce reusable assets, often digital assets like videos or auditory interviews or quizzes or textbooks, for example. All of this can be shared across all of those platforms. So when you add value in that way, you end up with an extremely well-resourced body of content which can be repurposed. And the more you add to that, I think the better it is. But the important thing is maintaining academic standards and keeping that up to scratch. So if you create a video, for example, one of the important things is to make it not too specific to that point in time, that year, or that particular latest piece of research, but focus on more general elements that will be equally of interest to that person watching it, a month or so after the video was created, but also maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, it keeps its relevance. So building up bigger content, keeping the relevance and academic standards, and then chopping it down into usable formats is the best way, in my view, to repurpose, reuse, and have a high impact in original content whilst maintaining academic standards. So drawing on my own research from Education for Sustainable Development and Virtual Worlds best practice, I think I've been able to show that one can introduce a research element and maintain one's own practice and publications there, and utilize those in teaching, because people love to hear about your own original research and the research of your PhD students especially, which tends to be cutting edge original research. People also love to hear across all of these formats stories, real world stories about people with these conditions. It might be anecdotal, it might be based on one's clinical practice or experience or work in the field. But if you keep it interesting and you keep it relevant and you show what benefit it has to the individual in listening to this content, you'll take person on that journey. You'll maintain the interest. And I think keeping it relevant to the learner and knowing who you're trying to engage, who the learner is at any given time, is really important as well. So then, I hope you've enjoyed that summary of how this original material can be reused and repurposed for high engagement and high impact. We looked at online learning, we looked at campus learning, we looked at our collaborative partners internationally, and we looked at reusing and repurposing modularized sections of this teaching for commercial short courses. In my case, for parents of autistic and ADHD children, and for professionals working in the field. Also, I spoke about internal and external staff training, which is, I think, often not looked at sufficiently. It's a real area that we can share with our peers and our collaborators and the people we work amongst. Actually, sharing practice, I think, is really important. But it also can be commercialized as well. And certainly in the educational sector, there's a good opportunity there. One thing that I think is really important to note as well is, as this material goes out, you get invites to conferences, and you get a lot of them. As long as you're engaging with the latest research, you're putting it out there confidently, you're consistently hitting the academic standards and offering your expertise, your content knowledge out there across networks, people will take you up on that call to action, and they'll say, come along to the conference, speak to us, or we've got this panel, we want you to sit in on this, or be an editor of this journal, whatever. There's ample opportunity, but that doesn't often arise unless you push it out there. So you have to take that material, you have to push it out there, and you have to maintain the academic standards. It's not as time intensive as it might seem. What has to be done is it has to be modularized, and you have to think strategically about that learning design in advance. One of the things I would really recommend as well is to take your subject level knowledge and to put that into a book. So if you have written an original module or contributed to original modules, think about how you can write that into a textbook. You are the expert on that material. It's relatively easy to self-publish these days if you want to do it that way, and to get a book out there. But once that book is out there, it's available for all of your learners, and you can offer that as a resource. So again, you can use the modularization method to construct chapters, and these can relate to the traditional weekly sections that one might offer in a traditional sort of campus-based context there. But the one thing I think that everyone should consider, and first off, consider if there's a demand for people wanting this material out there in the public, is to consider a free, massive, open online course, a MOOC. The notion of it being free is a big appeal, of course, but people do want to access your knowledge. And I think as long as it's been put in a format where it's logically easy to consume and pitched at the right level, I think this is a great opportunity for us. And I'd recommend everyone to engage across all of these platforms. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. It's a long-term vision. So thanks for hearing about my stuff, and I hope you agree that strategic learning design is worth doing across all of these different formats. And thanks for listening.